evening. Welcome to the League of Women Voters of the Eastern Upper Peninsula Candidate Forum for the two men who are vying for a position for District B, am I correct, of the Cloverland Board. I'm Linda Stetzer. I'm the moderator for the evening. Helping us tonight are Les Townsend, the timekeeper, and Kelly Townsend, who is the questions screener. Paul Warwick is recording this forum. It will be posted later on the YouTube channel and also on our website or Facebook, or there'll be links there. I live in District B, so I'll try to be as impartial as I possibly can. The League of Women Voters is a 102-year-old political organization dedicated to defending democracy and encouraging and informing voters. We are nonpartisan. We neither support nor oppose any candidate or any political party. Any event by the League of Women, sponsored by the League of Women Voters, is conducted with the utmost respect of neutrality and nonpartisanship. Our intention is to conduct a public event with fairness and even-handedness. These are the ground rules for the evening. Excuse me. Campaign materials are outside of this room. No literature may be given to the audience by the candidates or members of their campaign before or during this forum. Filming or recording of this forum is strictly forbidden. Do not take any photographs during the forum. There will be opportunity for letting the candidates choose all of you after the forum is over. Please remain from any emotional outbursts, including applause. There will be opportunity for applause at the conclusion of the forum. Turn your cell phones off or silence them, please. And if you have to take a call, please take it outside of this room. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to make an opening statement. Following opening statements, candidates will take questions from the lead and from you and posed by me, the moderator. There are 3x5 cards back on the table. I think I handed out some to just about everyone. So any questions that you have, don't raise your hand. Put them on paper, and they will be. I'll direct the questions. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to answer the questions, and responses will be timed. And Les has these nice paddles, and they're for your benefit. If you have questions pertaining to anything about this election, you may visit, well, Old 411 doesn't have this, but the Cloverland Connections has information about both of you, and your ballots will be coming out in May. Thanks to the Bayliss Public Library for assisting us with this event. Thank you also to the, to the League. I brought water. Thank you also to the League members for helping. And a big thank you to the candidates for attending and sharing their information. Serving in a public leadership position is one of dedication and personal sacrifice. The League is nonpartisan, although we are political. We don't take a position on anything without doing a thorough study of the topic. And we believe in diversity, equality, and inclusion. So our candidates for tonight are Mr. Turho and Mr. Sawruk. And I will start with Mr. Sawruk, starting with the opening question, with the opening statement. 3 minutes.
I want to thank the League for organizing this forum on such short notice. My name is John Sawruk. I'm a lifelong resident of Sault Ste. Marie. I graduated from Lake Superior State University in 1977. it's hard for me to fathom or remember that it's going to be 50 years this June since I began my working career professionally. I was right out of high school. I had good drafting skills, and I was hired to redo the turbine drawings that were falling apart at the hydro plant. The plant's been running since 1903, and I was just in awe of the building, as you can imagine. But they hired me to work part-time while I attended Lake Superior State, and I left for 3 years to teach drafting at the Sioux Area Skill Center. And within 3 years, they decided to offer me full-time employment, and I returned. So I've got 47 years work experience in the electric utility business. It's been a great career. I've worked in so many different operations. I worked in mapping. I went out and measured everything and mapped the distribution system. I worked on converting that from paper records into computer data files. I had to go back to Lake State in the evenings to learn AutoCAD. I took courses through the University of Wisconsin, Ferris State University, as well as Chevron Russell to learn AutoCAD. It's been a great career, and I've been grateful for the public for giving me the chance to serve 9 years on the board of directors. One of the first things I learned taking classes from the board of directors is that a director's role is as an advocate for the members. I'm there speaking for the people, and I don't think I can illustrate it any better way by saying I fought and worked hard to get the meetings open to the public. And it wasn't easy. In fact, it turned out people fought me so hard, we had to go get a change of leadership on the board, 4 new board members. Finally, today, meetings are open to the public monthly, and instead of a summary being printed in the magazine, you see the actual minutes, records of what's being done. I'm very proud of that achievement. It didn't come easy. There was opposition to it, but I stuck to it and was able to find people that worked with me. I appreciate your coming tonight, and I hope you can learn more about us and what our plans are for the future for Cloverland Electric Cooperative. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, thank the League of Women Voters for putting this all together so we both get a chance to meet you. I wanted to kind of short with my biography. You can find all of that in the Cloverland Connections. I've got a slightly technical topic that I want to delve into just a little bit, so we'll skip right over my background. You can read that up in the Connections. Basically, I have an electrical engineering degree that I applied over a 40-year career working for a couple of big technical companies. Various courses over the years. None of that was with Cloverland. We owned a house in the area about 15 years. We've been here about 12. So none of that experience was with Cloverland. I don't see that in any way as a detriment to this job because I've had a chance to work with some large corporations around the world solving problems, basically, and doing the design and the management work. The topic I wanted to kind of bring up relates to how I got started to run for this office. Cloverland employee approached me and suggested that I go to some of the board meetings and consider running for a director. He thought that perhaps the board could use my technical expertise. And when I attended the meeting, I was really kind of surprised at what I was seeing. This was just shortly after they adopted the new rate structure that came into being in January, I believe. And some of the board members still were asking rather basic questions of management about the rate structure. And I was even wondering if any of the board members understood it, because why would you let any of your co-board members proceed with this if they didn't thoroughly understand it? You probably noticed this entry on your bill, and I wanted to talk just a little bit about that. That's one of the goals I would have as a director, is to get this moved to a little more advanced structure. This is a copy off of my bill. Thank you. Notice the kilowatts are now being measured and it amounts to a $3 addition to your bill. One of the issue I have with this is it's a rather blunt instrument to control peak. It's being advertised as a way that Cloverland can reduce their bill from Wisconsin Electric by dropping the peak energy that they use during the month. So they're passing some of that on to you. So what I wanted to point out is that if you look at how the Cloverland limitations compares with the other local utilities, this is Cloverland. They're watching you for about 5,000 hours during the, are you holding up any of those, or? That is it? Yeah, okay. Anyways, my point was that many more hours that Cloverland is watching you during the month, it basically eliminates your ability to cooperate with the cooperative to lower that rate. So that's one of the first things that I look at having management adjust.
Thank you.
More.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, if you want to, Kelly, I can have two people writing. So, do you have any specific goals for Cloverland management? And we'll start with Mr. Churko.
Oh, sure. Actually, that was really just what I was getting into. And of course, the first thing how long do I have for this?
A minute and a half.
One of the first things I would get into is basically shut off and get to know the board, because one of the most important things is that one member can probably not do much of anything on the board. You've got to build some support and coalitions. So this is probably the first objective, is to get to know the board. And then relatively quickly, I'd want to try to get improvements made in this peak rate and get a more involved, perhaps, marketing department going throughout the utility to help customers understand it and understand how they could benefit from using it. I think actually you could lower your electric rates, your own rates, and what the cooperative pays by optimizing this peak rate structure.
Thank you. Mr. Russ?
The implementation of he's speaking about the capacity charge, it is revenue neutral. What I mean by that is if like say the chargers that Tesla installed were paying $2,200 in energy charge, but they paid another $6,600 in capacity. That was all rolled into one figure. It's not a new increase. It's the people doing the cost of service study said you have to break that out, let people know that when they use power matters as much as how much. It's complicated, and we had to start somewhere, so we started with a wide window. As we get more data back in a year or two, we can narrow that window down, so our costs will go down. The power agreement with Wisconsin Electric expires at the year 2029. Mike Heise and the CEO have already formed the internal load forecasting team. That team, they used to just look at one individual would watch the weather in Milwaukee and say, okay, when's the peak? And he would base his decision when to run the diesels on that. Pat Frazier, the new chief operating officer, brought aboard, now created that load forecasting team, created an algorithm, and they plug in many pieces of data. He's been so successful, he's 6 out of 6 in the last month in hitting the peak. What does that mean? We saved anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000 a month. And I looked at before I came here, at the financials, which I see every month as a board member. During the first 3 months, we've already saved $1.3 million.
Thank you. Next question. Given the climate emergency, what type or types of renewable green energy generation changes do you think Cloverland should make? Mr. Sawruk.
Cloverland Electric is probably the greenest utility, and definitely in the state of Michigan, possibly in a large part of the United States. 50% of our generation comes from renewables. We have a 30-megawatt hydroelectric facility that we run, and we buy the excess from the core, which is roughly 20 megawatts. In addition, the Pittsburgh Solar Farm, I pulled the numbers from my report at the board meeting Tuesday, and in February, we collected, we paid $21,935 for it, and we turned around and sold the energy and the capacity on a market which fluctuates. We netted a margin of $16,973. And we are looking currently at another solar farm. But these are outside owned, so we don't have the investment. We buy it and turn around and sell it on the market. In fact, our CEO identified the new CEO. We sell the excess power we have, the energy credits. They're called renewable energy credits. And he made over $1 million last year. Under the old administration, we were told there's no market for these. Well, Mike and Pat have done a tremendous job finding a market for selling them.
Actually, the new peak rate is an important part of the alternate energy picture. What that allows us to do is to have you match your load when energy is available, and that's going to be getting more and more important in the future. So it is critical that we roll out the peak energy measurement. I think it may have a ways to go before it becomes energy or dollar neutral, because I recall the president reported last Tuesday that they were up $500,000 for the month with the new peak rate. But, that's going to have to be tweaked. What that'll do is it will allow the co-op and the co-op owners, that's you, to modulate your load to match when this alternate energy is available, which is, since it's not dispatchable, you have to kind of match the load to when it's available. So that'll become more and more important over the years.
Next question, we'll start with Mr. Sawruk. What are the requirements for district residency? Do you have to live in this district?
Yes, well, they don't have to live here, but they have to have an electric meter and account to be eligible to vote in this election. Is that the question you're asking, Linda?
These questions come, I read them, I don't break them.
Okay.
What are the requirements for district residency? So are you required to live in the district? And the second part of that is, do you live in this district?
Yes, I live in this district. I'm a lifelong resident, and to have a vote in the election, you have to have an electric meter, so you have an account. One member, one vote.
Okay, Mr. Turco?
I've not got a lot to add to that, other than I live in the district also, and have for about 10 years. I guess there's a number of shades of that question you might consider. To be a voting member, you have to live here. To be a director, you have to live here. I would kind of hope that the management teams have to live here. I've heard some rumors from some of the union people at Cloverland that they're kind of annoyed that their president spends half of his time in Florida. But that is a rumor, but it's certainly something that I'd want to look into on if I was a board member, I think. Well, I'm not sure that it's a forum we ought to be following here. I could talk to you.
No. No. You talk after.
Okay.
Are you, next question, are you on any other board?
Myself?
We'll start with Mr. Turtle.
Sure. No, I'm not, and I've never served on a board. That's probably an important question. I hope that John can answer no, because I've seen in the board minutes where in the past someone serving on another board had to abstain from voting, and you really can't represent your members if you have to abstain. So take, for example, if somebody served on the hospital board, and there was an issue that came before the board regarding the hospital electric power, then they'd have to abstain. So I think there's an advantage to not being on any other boards.
Mr. Ruff?
I've had several board experiences. I was on the Augusta Hursley Seal Estate Trust Fund overseeing for the City of Sault Ste. Marie. I was on the Board of Appeals for the Building Department for the City of Sault Ste. Marie. I served on the Parish Financial Council for St. Mary's Church. I was president of the Financial Council Church Council, the Nativity Catholic Church. Trying to think, I have other board memberships. The important thing that I learned was I had to take classes through NRECA to get accreditation. It's not a requirement, it's an option, but I've diligently took courses, and it took me 6 years, but I finally attained the top level, gold level. And I think it's important because you learn what is the role of a board member and what is the role of management. And it's important that the two do not intertwine and cross. We've got a very good working relationship with this management team, and I think taking classes through NRECA was well worth it.
What is NRECA? What is NRECA?
National Rural Electric Cooperative Association. I'm sorry, there's a lot of acronyms in this business, and I'll try and catch myself, but they fly all the time.
Okay. Next question. Do you plan on any reduced rate for seniors or those who are on a fixed budget? And we'll start with Mr. Sawruk.
Rate structure is, we hired a firm that specializes that, come in, they analyze your rates, and what they do is they'll say these are the different rate classes they recommend, and they look at the expense it costs to serve them and the rate adjustment accordingly. You have industrials, commercials, residential, R1. No, we don't have any plans to base them on income or age. To answer that question honestly, no, there is no plan to do that at this time.
Sure. John would know better what's in the books here. One of the things that has occurred to me is that, in fact, the new demand rate, a kilowatt demand costs the cooperative purchased from Wisconsin Electric a very large number. I think I've heard a number of $30 a kilowatt. Right? On your bill is a charge of if it's residential, of under $1 a kilowatt. In a way, this forces the senior citizen living at home with 3 light bulbs and a TV set to subsidize the bigger consumers that are running power tools, factories, whatnot. It might be interesting if we could get the demand rate on a little more equitable basis so the low-end user wasn't subsidizing the peak demand for the big users. That's one suggestion I would have, which would kind of relate to low-income seniors.
Thank you. Next question. Why do you want to serve on the Cloverland board? And we'll start with Mr. Turtle.
Basically, because I've watched the board, and I think that they need more technical input, and I can provide that.
Mr. Rock?
I want to serve to be an advocate for the membership. I'm passionate about this industry. I've always been fascinated by it from the day I walked into that hydro plant and saw it. I work in so many different aspects, mapping. I work with crews out bird dogging, going ahead of them in storms. I did bucket rescue practice in case the linemen were to get electrocuted so I could go up and help retrieve them. The guys kind of laughed at me how nervous I was, but I did it. I ran the hydro plant. I worked in control center during storms. Well, the only area I'm not real familiar with was the financial and accounting, but I did work with them. My maps had to tie out with what the property record showed. So I've got a broad understanding of this industry. One of the first things I looked and learned in taking courses from public utility reports was in manufacturing sector, for every dollar invested, you can expect $1.50 return. In the electric utility business, for every dollar invested, you only get 50-cent rate of return. But you get it spread over a longer period of time, and you have a monopoly. When I got in at Cloverland on the board, I had to go back to school because it's a completely different business model, the co-op. So those classes I took were very valuable in helping me understand. And as far as being fair or equitable on the rates, that's what the class of service study does. We do not cross-subsidize. Each group is paying their fair share now. I want to make that clear.
Thank you. Excuse me. Next question. The wide window for determining the demand charge is because we need to pin down Wisconsin Electric's peak, not ours. Is that correct?
Me?
I'm sorry.
Yes, and as I said, Mike has assembled internal load forecasting team, some real smart young guys in mathematics, and they've created an algorithm, and they plug in data, and they meet every day at 4 o'clock, and they say, okay, what diesels do we run tomorrow at what time? And so far, they're 6 for 6 at peak shaving, and like I said, looking at the financials, I look at them every month before the board meeting. I spend a couple hours, and we saved $1.3 million during the first 3 months already. We used to just watch the weather. Well, with the bringing in of Pat Frazier, who's, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody in the United States knows more about power marketing. And he's teaching the young team that he created, so they'll be ready to pick up where he left off. We've got a very good program watching peak power market.
Now I'm going to get a chance to use my graphic after all. But John's right. The peak that we're trying to match is Wisconsin. But I think this is where I would want to push back a little bit more on management with our peak club.
Jim, could I get you to turn that so I could see it? Because I'd like to know what. Thank you.
This is the number of hours per year that the peak is measured for Cloverland, about 5,000 hours, and you have no choice. You join it, right? Wisconsin Electric, which presumably we're trying to match, right, only measures their customers for a little less than 3,000 hours a year. And they actually offer 5 different choices about how you pick your peak. So there's a little bit of flexibility allowing the customer to maybe optimize for the customer and optimize for the core. So I guess I would challenge that why did we end, if we're trying to match Wisconsin, and that is my understanding also, how did we end up with so much more restrictive peak measurement system? And I guess I certainly want to, board doesn't get to decide that. I push back at management and on the team that came up with this. No, this is not a new idea to have peak measurements. If you go on the internet, you can find dozens of different ways it's being implemented. And I would have liked to see something that gave a little more flexibility to the user.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Please expand on the philosophy of the board of directors and what their role is, and why should they be involved in management? And we start with Mr. Jervis.
Well, I guess it depends on what you call involved in management. They get to pick the management, certainly, and they pass final judgment on a lot of important decisions. Let's say in the case of this rate structure, I think all they can really do is make sure that the management is taking the proper steps to study the situation and to make a proposal, and then perhaps push back if they don't think they've done a proper job. But the board can't get involved in the everyday operations. They've got to pick a competent management staff and then maybe pass final judgment on what they're doing.
Mr. Sawruk, same question.
The role of a board member are clearly defined in the classes you take from NRECA. They are, 1, hire a competent CEO who then selects the management team. 2, member advocate. We are there representing the people. 3, risk management. And 4, setting board policy. And 5, approving budget. It is you can't have people on the board directing the workforce. That's clearly the responsibility of the CEO who selects the management team. And we are having a very good team right now. I'm very appreciative of the talent he's bringing in assembled, and they're doing an exceptional job. The contract with WEC was created before he came here, and he's doing his best to mitigate it. In fact, he took the challenge to FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, took them to federal court and won a ruling getting their their depreciation schedule reduced from 12% to 9% 2 years ago. That resulted in a saving of $300,000 a month going forward to the end of the contract. So we have a very competent and capable management team, skilled staff. I think we're on the right track. Are we perfect? No, we never are. But Mike's working to constantly look and improve and working with his team.
Next question. Why does experience matter with oversight of the electricity utility business? We start with Mr. Sawruk.
Why does what matter again?
Experience.
Like I said, this industry is very capital intense. What I mean by that is you're going to spend millions of dollars and your return is over a much longer period of time. It's very important you realize how different this is. One of the things I learned earlier working with the line crews, don't be in a hurry. If you hurry, you make mistakes. If you make mistakes, people get injured or killed. Fortunately, we never had any while I was at Edison Sioux Electric Company. The guys are very professional, and you have to, it's a very unforgiving industry. If you make a mistake, people can be killed. Experience is everything. As a board member, it's important that you understand how this business differs from the manufacturing sector. And I think that the experience, you just can't replace it. You need education, too. That's why I went to Lake State. That's why post-grad, I went to courses through the University of Wisconsin. The one was called Information Geographic System. When we started our mapping, converting to computer files. Had other courses on everything you ever want to know about wood utility poles. Believe it or not, I spent 5 days learning that, and I learned everything on poles. But it's very important to go back. Education, you need that, but you also have to temper that with experience. I couldn't function in the job as well as I did had I not worked with the guys in the field and know firsthand what they are up against.
Thank you. Mr. Turco, same question.
Sure. I think that probably experience is always valuable to the extent that you're able to apply it to the job that you're doing. And John has certainly tested me in terms of the utility experience. I think where I would hope that I could shine perhaps is a broader base of experience in other industries and other requirements, particularly as we're moving into a sort of a new world here with the dramatic integration of alternate power sources. I think there's going to be a lot of problems that are going to come up, and I think that my experience throughout other industries is going to be useful. And of course, there's other board members that I can benefit from, and we'll reach hopefully the best compromise on those issues.
Thank you. Next question. Why are you a better candidate than your opponent? And we start with Mr. Turco.
Because of my broader technical background, electrical engineering, 40 years basically of experience in the technical businesses. I've worked for two major technical companies and then a couple of others since then as a consultant. So I would demur to John's past experience with Cloverland and some of the things he's accomplished on the board. I just think that my broader breadth and more technical detail experience maybe is something the board needs at this time.
What was the question again?
Why are you a better candidate than your opponent?
I feel that I have a more broader background. I'm not a specialist in any one thing, but I can recall going to seminars and training. And the guy would say, "Who's in charge of the primary maps there?" And I'd raise my hand. And they'd say, "Who's in charge of the oil testing program?" And I'd raise my hand. "Who's in charge of transmission?" Or every time I raise my hand, "Is there anything you don't do?" And to be honest with you, yes, I worked in so many different applications. In a small utility, you have to do that. So I had a broad knowledge, everything from the guys out in the field to the accountants when I tied property records in. But as far as how to wire up a VWE, I think Mr. Turho here could beat me at that. But I feel I have a more broad background in all aspects of the business. And I augmented that by taking courses through NRECA.
Oh, we already did that.
We did that.
Good question.
Excuse me. Next question. If elected, would you pledge to be physically present at every meeting? And we start with Mr. Sawruk.
I think that's where this is coming from, is the board has a policy that you can do 2 meetings electronically attend each year. And we did that for a couple of reasons. First of all, when COVID hit, we did, I think, 12 or 14 meetings, Willie, remotely. The other reason is because of where we live. There's times the director from Mackinac Island can't get in, or it's unsafe driving across the western UP. So we say, okay, 2 are allowed to electronically attend. They can't do the executive sessions, which are closed. So it works well. I can't promise I'll make every one, but I'll try. In the last year, I think the only one I missed was this pre-planned this spring when I went to visit my kids for a couple of weeks in Florida. So to answer the question, I can't pledge that. Unless you can predict the weather, I don't think you can.
Yeah, I think pledge is a pretty strong guarantee also. It certainly is my goal to attend every meeting in person. The one variation on that I might suggest is that the board is paid on a per diem basis, and out of industry at least, per diem means your expenses to do something on a daily basis. I guess I would at least suggest that maybe the board ought to consider, if you can't attend the meeting, then maybe you shouldn't collect your full per diem.
Can I speak to that?
Do you have any time left? Yeah.
I hope people don't think that we're in a 3-hour meeting and that's the extent of it. I put in 10 hours a week reading. When the storms hit, I am on my iPad looking where they are. And I can recall one time the township supervisor, Rich Phillips in Brimley, and I talk often, and he said, well, I found this in such and such location. I relayed that to the people handling the outage, and they sent the crew there. But I spend about 10 hours a week, and a good board member should, looking at financials, operational reports, etc. So it's not just that 3 hours you sit there, it's the hours you put in outside.
Sure, I'll allow you 30 seconds too if you have anything else.
Okay.
You're okay. Next question. How could Cloverland increase their REC revenues? And I don't know what REC is.
RECs, Renewable Energy Credits.
Oh, okay. Another. Okay. And we begin with Mr. Churchill.
Well, of course, adding more, actually, and I believe there is a plan underway to add approximately 10 megawatts with the tribe. He's talking about putting in a 10 megawatt solar plant along with batteries, which is a particularly good idea because that's one of the weaknesses of solar, is it isn't always there. So if you match it up with batteries, it won't create the kind of problems that it otherwise would. So there's something I think is already being planned, is that 10 megawatt, and there's some kind of things that are going to be a lot tougher to implement, but of course and it is allowed right now, is that the customers, members, can implement small solar on their own residences. Perhaps what we could do there is maybe have a little broader marketing awareness of that. It's currently allowed, but see if the marketing department couldn't expand on their informing the members that that's available to them. But Cooperative has done a really pretty good job. I mean, right now, something over half of our power does come from renewables, and that will only increase because of the things that are currently in place.
Thank you. Mr. Sawruk, any questions?
CEO Highs is in speaking with the fellow that developed the solar farm at Pickford. They are looking at more expansion. You'd be hard-pressed to find anybody do more renewable. On the residential side, we have a net metering program in place, and people that generate on their own, it's very infinitesimal, small percentage, but we buy that power from them now. That's why people don't invest in it, because the amount of investment, you don't get a return on your money. But we don't discourage it. They're allowed to do it, and we buy that power. at the going rate, what we sell it for.
Next question. How do you plan to prevent future problems with electric service? When we start with Mr. Sawruk.
Linda, could you repeat that? I couldn't.
How do you plan to prevent future problems with electric service?
Our service territory is very broad. Since they combined the Edison, Sioux, and Cloverland, we cover from the east end of Drummond Island to the Garden Peninsula. And I would believe you could spend 5 hours just traversing that. We keep statistics, and we see them monthly, what's recommended by the IEEE and Linda, the Edison Electric Institute or something, I can't remember. But it's a nationwide standard, and one is called SAIDI and one is SAIFI, stands for System Average Interruption Index and System Average Interruption Duration. And we look at these monthly, and we analyze them as a board. And Mike will send us an email, say, hey, our old friend, the EK1 circuit's in trouble right tonight. And what he does, he will look at future work plans, like the line to Paradise. He said, okay, there's a section goes through a swamp that we can bury it because nobody's going to connect to it. So we are looking at ways to improve service, and I'm very proud of our performance of our work crews. These indexes indicate we're one of the top utilities in restoration.
And Mr. Jerko, same question.
Yeah. Proper investment and continued evaluating how you're doing with things like tree trimming and line maintenance. That's where most of the issues do come from, I think, is it's issues with the lines that where the weather brings down a tree or something. And if people are concerned about it, then I think that's maybe we need to put a little more money into those tree trimming contracts that are yearly.
Can I add a little?
Sure.
We increased the tree trimming budget a couple of years ago from $1.5 million to $3.5 million, and that was done because we were approached by citizens who didn't like us spraying. They were concerned about the health effects. So I told them if we're going to do that, we're going to have to increase our tree trimming budget substantially, and we have done that. We've responded to people's concerns, and we are more aggressively tree cutting. But that gets to be a very emotional issue too at times.
Okay, next question. Will the savings spoken of ever pass directly to the customers in a bill reduction? And we'll start with Mr. Turho.
Well, yes, of course, because the Cloverland has a capital payback period. If the operating expenses of the co-op are less than the money they collect, that money is given back to you on a regular basis. So I think that gives a bit more flexibility to the co-op to fund these sort of things. They should be generously funded and generously collecting the rate. And if they miscalculate, you'll be getting that money back.
Mr. Sawruk, the same question.
Could you repeat the question? Will
the savings spoken of ever pass directly to the customers in a bill reduction?
What savings spoken of? I guess I'm a little...
I just read.
Yeah, I'm a little confused. I guess I'll just try and explain capital credits. In an investor-owned utility, any monies that the utility earns over and above operating expenses is returned to the shareholders in the form of dividends. In the co-op world, any monies in excess are deemed capital credits, and they're returned to the members who are indeed the shareholders. When I first got elected, our equity was down at 14%, and that meant you had to go to NRECA to get permission to return capital credits to the investors. Now, there was two ways to do that. One was to go borrow more money in long-term debt, increasing it so you could give back that money. Instead, Mike insisted, let's get our equity up to where it should be, where it is now at 32% and trending upward. We reduce long-term debt, and now we pay out capital credits on a 30-year schedule. So we're ahead of most co-ops in the country doing that. But as Mike said, it didn't make sense to borrow money from future people so you can give some of these people now their money back. So yes, they are getting their money back through savings.
Thank you.
I have a additional comment.
Sure.
If the money saving commented in that question was perhaps referring to my hinting that there might be money to be saved in the purchasing. I guess the way that I envisioned it is that if we do come up with a new peak rate structure, that would be immediately reflected in a rate structure change. So you'd see those benefits more or less immediately. If that's what they were referring to.
Thank you. Next question. Where do you see our electric plants and supply coming from in the future? And we start with Mr. Sawruk.
Funny enough, back in 2001, Brother Donald, who was president of Edison Sioux, asked me to write permits applications to the Corps of Engineers because I had painted the ones across the straits, and I told him, I don't think they're going to give us a permit to get to Canada. Funny enough, Mike High said, guess what? It not only was received, but it had to be signed off by the President of the United States. When the boat hit the anchor on our submarine cable tie to the south, Mike heightened our awareness, said, you know what, we've only got one other tie, and that's to the west. So he is actively getting RFPs, requests for proposals, to tie to Canada with cables. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, it'll give us reliability increase and resiliency. What do I mean by resiliency? Power flows both to the south across the straits and also to the north. There's a possibility we could wheel power to the north and get revenue for moving that power to Canada. It's all going to depend on the cost if we can make money doing it. Likewise, there's renewable energy over there that could be moved south, and if they cross on cables we own, we could earn money, thereby holding down costs for our membership. So that's the way we would do it. We should be looking at another tie to Canada. We are. And
Chair holds this question.
Sure. I guess we all wish that plan that Mike put together about 20 years ago had been implemented then, when it was maybe going to cost us $4 or $5 million as opposed to what it may cost today. But of course, that is one of the things that will give resilience to the system and tying into Canada. Also, there'll be increases in locally. Very expensive to build generation facilities, and I doubt if that's going to be happening. But there will be additional power here locally as places like the Tribe and additional solar comes online.
can I add to that?
Yeah, I think we have about 15 seconds left.
18 seconds?
15, I think.
50 or 15? I'm sorry. We are looking, exploring, and partnering with others to build a UP plant for generation. I can't get into the details anymore. Obviously, that's something we speak of in executive session, but that is being looked at possibly into Ontario. Algoma may be expanding. So I wouldn't rule out a power plant in the future.
I have two questions left, and unless there are some here. The first one is, well, second to last. Oh, we have another coming in. Should a director be allowed to not represent us by abstaining from voting because their employer tells them to abstain? And we start with Mr. Turtle.
That's kind of a complicated question. Can you read it again, please?
Remember, I just read them.
Yeah.
Should a director be allowed to not represent us, the members, by abstaining from voting because their employer tells them to abstain?
I guess I'd have to say yes. You've got a poor choice of director, perhaps, but do you really want them voting if they've got that much influence? And if their employer has told them to vote some certain way, I guess the best you can hope for is an abstention.
Mr. Ruck?
I think the issue came up because we have one director who is a federal government employee, and when it came to any rate adjustments, he was advised by his employer he had to abstain. Other than that, he's been a very valuable board member. He's got a master's in public administration. He's written board policies. He's, yes, I think he should be able to serve on the board. He's been very helpful, and I would support, continue letting him serve.
Add to that, please. I guess that sort of goes back to my comment a few minutes ago about how conflicting board representations are a problem. should be discouraged. But, it can't be avoided in some situations, I'm sure.
Sometimes issues come up, and to be clear, we say, you know, I don't want to, even an appearance of conflict of interest. They purchased some property one time, and I said, I know this person. Should I abstain? And the attorney said, well, did you know before this was coming? And I said, no. She said, fine. There are going to be instances when unless you live in a cave, you're going to be involved in other areas. So then there are times when you have to abstain. If it gets to be a lot of abstention, then the voters should decide who they want and don't want to serve.
Next question. How long does it take to recover the capital investment cost of equipment for wind and solar? And we start with Mr. Sawruk.
I don't have the depreciation schedules on those, but I do know equipment in the utility from working poles around here. They might get a 40-year, 50 years even out of them. Transformers, 30, 35, they all have different depreciation schedules. As for wind and solar, I'm not familiar with them because we didn't build any of them. Those are private entities building that we then feed or buy power from.
I think I was going to head to that comment also about how these are privately owned things, and it's sort of between the person that makes the investment and how they can justify it with their investors or some government subsidy they might get. So,
Thank you. And the last question that I have, do you agree with or disagree with the proposed tunnel under the Mackinac Straits? And can Cloverland utilize the tunnel?
In Cloverland what?
Utilize the tunnel. If the tunnel is built, can Cloverland use the tunnel? We begin with Mr. Cherholt.
sure. I guess I'm probably going to ruin it here now if you expected a political answer, but I basically disagree with it, but for a reason you might not expect is I just don't think it's necessary. If we can just keep boats from dropping their anchor in the wrong place, which I think can be addressed by the Coast Guard with some other regulations, it really shouldn't be an issue. And the tunnel is, although it was being built, I believe, for the oil pipeline, it really shouldn't be an issue that we'd have to deal with. We have a system that, of laying the electric cables on the bottom that should be adequate.
You're saying it should be done?
I'm saying that the tunnel isn't for the electric, but I never even felt that it was necessary, right? We have other things that are supposed to keep boats from dropping their anchors and tearing up cables.
Mr. Sawruk.
Enbridge, and I can't speak to the numbers because it's a confidential issue, Enbridge is our biggest customer. I used to fly that one with a helicopter. They parallel our transmission line. I worked on getting cathodic protection for their pipeline. They are a very important customer of ours. They have approached us about possibly using some of the tunnel or supplying the energy to operate it. Personally, I think if they're being responsible enough to put it under in a tunnel, it's probably the best way to go. And I would hope they buy power from us and not from consumers. They showed every interest of doing that, to buy power from us. Could we lay cables in it? It's possible. As far as cables being safe, the ones are jacketed in steel, and you got to remember those cables have been in there since 1975, and it's the first time they were struck. And it was irresponsible action on part of the boat. They dropped the anchor, didn't even know they were dragging it. So,
Added comment? I'm not so sure. I maybe feel more comfortable with the cable laying on the bed of the straits than a tunnel. There's a gap there because there's a certain amount of seismic activity involved. If there's a tunnel, it's going to be much more sensitive to shifting a few inches of the structure than the cables are. I think they're probably resilient enough, and we ought to pin that on the people that do the damage.
to be clear, I would prefer laying the cable on the bottom as they are and the jacketed armor as it is. But they are a vital, vital link. We need that cable tie to the south. We used to buy our power from consumers. Depending on the time of day, power flows can go south or they can travel north. However, they put an AC-DC transformer, I say American Transmission Company who owns the transmission grid, and it's a choke point. We could move 100 megawatts of power north across that straits on those cables, but we can only move 5 megawatts because of the choke point they created by that AC-DC transformer. So it's a vital link. We need it. We need the one to the west, and if we can economically do one to the north, I think we'll see it, a very, very real possibility that will come.
10-second addition.
Sure.
Shouldn't have started it, right? Right now, we are limited to 5 megawatts coming across that cable. We run at 5 megawatts. I understand that the choke point is actually able to go to 20 megawatts.
Could be 100 megawatts.
Well, right, the 100 megawatts for the cable, the choke point is limited us to 20, but it's basically not enough.
Thank you. Time for closing discussion, closing statements, and we have how much for this last time? 2 minutes for the closing statement. And we start with Mr. Turco.
Well, I'm not quite sure how to fill up my 2 minutes, but I basically have outlined to some extent in my biography my qualifications. I'm committed to representing the members. I can't say that John has not. I was a little surprised that the board meetings needed to be opened, right? I appreciate you did that, but isn't it kind of surprising that they were ever closed, you know? But thank you, John, for taking care of that, and we should all pursue continuing that and making them even more detail available to the users, because it's important that the owners, the customers, and the members are the ones that should be managing the co-op, and I'll do my very best to represent them at every meeting I can possibly attend.
When I was first elected 9 years ago, the equity stood at 14%. That's an all-time low. Today it's at 32% and trending upward. We did that without a rate increase since 5 years ago. And this year we had to pass a minor 5% one. With the cost of materials, it had to happen to be responsible. Thank you for recognizing that opening the public meetings. I fought for that hard. It was not easy. I got into a board that they were adamant we aren't opening these meetings, and I just kept hammering, got different candidates to run, and finally when we got the new board members, we opened the meetings to the public as they should be. The minutes are published, not a summary. Somebody decided what to report, so we are transparent. With transparency, one of the drawbacks is people read things and they don't understand completely, well, why did you guys do this? Please call, email. I'm always accessible. I like to speak with people and clarify things. Next term, possible tie to Canada. That's got a real possibility. We could be joint power plant there or to the west in the UP. Expand broadband internet. I've met a director in the Midwest, in Cooperative, Midwest Energy, and I speak with them regularly on a yearly basis. They borrowed $63 million to expand broadband. And for those that don't know, Cooperative is in the southwest corner, and I asked, what's going on? He said they're leaving Chicago. So they're bringing investment and people coming there. And from what I've read and what he's told me, they had a break-even point of 40% of the people. If they would hook up, they would at least break even. They're well exceeding that. So with possible broadband expansion, working with the tribes, accessing grant monies, the future is very bright. SCADA, this supervisory control and data acquisition, we're going to link our substations. We're going ahead on many fronts. It's a very exciting time to be there, and I hope I can be reelected, and thanks for the opportunity to serve.
Thank you. This concludes our forum. Thank you to both of the candidates for being here tonight and expressing yourself without reservation. If you need to register to vote, not in that election, but in any other election, national, local, state, there are voter registration things on the back table. And that concludes everything. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And
Thank you.
okay, gentlemen, time to schmooze.
Do you want to have any additional questions for me? Okay. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Did you point, are you going to point to me? Just look over on Cool.